The year was 1830. America, a young nation, wrestled with a growing pain, the question of land, and who had the right to it. Vast territories west of the Mississippi beckoned settlers eager for a fresh start. But these lands were not empty. Native American tribes with their own deep histories and cultures called these lands home. At the heart of this tragedy lay the Indian Removal Act of 1830. This act, signed into law by President Andrew Jackson, authorized the forced removal of Native Americans from their ancestral lands in the Southeast. The Cherokee, Creek, Seminole, Chickasaw, and Choctaw nations, known as the Five Civilized Tribes, faced the agonizing prospect of leaving behind their homes, their farms, and the graves of their ancestors. The government promised them land in the West, in what is now Oklahoma, but the promise rang hollow to those facing the upheaval of their lives. Some championed the act as a necessary measure to secure the nation's borders and open up land for white settlers. Others denounced it as a cruel and unjust act of ethnic cleansing. Andrew Jackson, the 7th President of the United States, was a man of contradictions. A hero of the War of 1812, he was revered by many as a champion of the common man. Yet, he was also a slave owner and a staunch advocate for westward expansion, even at the expense of Native American rights. Jackson's support for Indian removal stemmed from a deeply held belief in white supremacy. He viewed Native Americans as savages, incapable of assimilating into white society or governing themselves. In his mind, removing them westward was not only justified but also beneficial, both for the nation and for the Indians themselves. He argued that relocation would protect them from encroachment by white settlers and allow them to preserve their way of life. The demand for land in the Southeast was immense, fueled by the rise of cotton as a cash crop and the lure of new opportunities. Powerful political factions, particularly in Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, exerted tremendous pressure on the federal government to remove the Indians and open up their lands for white settlement. Jackson, ever the shrewd politician, recognized that supporting Indian removal would solidify his support in these key states. Thus, a confluence of personal prejudice, political calculation, and the zeitgeist of westward expansion coalesced in Jackson's unwavering support for the Indian Removal Act. The passage of the Indian Removal Act marked the beginning of a dark chapter in American history. Over the next decade, the 5 civilized tribes, along with several other smaller tribes, were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands. Soldiers, under orders from the federal government, rounded up Native Americans, forcing them into internment camps. These camps, hastily constructed and poorly supplied, became breeding grounds for disease and despair. The journey west, known as the Trail of Tears, was a harrowing ordeal. Thousands of Native Americans, men, women, and children, were forced to march hundreds of miles, often in chains and under the watchful eyes of armed soldiers. The conditions were deplorable. Food and water were scarce, shelter was inadequate, and disease ran rampant. The elderly and the very young were particularly vulnerable, and many perished along the way. It is estimated that over 4,000 Cherokee, nearly a quarter of their population, died on the Trail of Tears. Section 4. Tears on the Trail, Stories of Loss and Despair. The Trail of Tears was not just a mass migration, it was a collective trauma, a human tragedy of immense proportions. Behind the statistics lay individual stories of heartbreak, loss, and resilience. Stories of families torn apart, of children orphaned, of elders succumbing to exhaustion and despair. These stories, passed down through generations, serve as a poignant reminder of the human cost of forced removal. One such story is that of John Ross, the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation. Ross, a man of education and refinement, had spent years trying to negotiate a peaceful resolution to the conflict with the United States government. He had even taken the Cherokee case to the Supreme Court, which had ruled in their favor. But Andrew Jackson, defiant in the face of legal opposition, refused to enforce the court's decision. When the forced removal began, Ross's own family was torn apart. His wife, Quaddy, died on the trail, leaving him to care for their young children. Ross, heartbroken but undeterred, continued to lead his people, guiding them through the hardships of the journey and fighting for their rights in their new home in the West. Another story is that of Private John G. Burnett, a soldier who served in the U.S. Army during the Cherokee removal. Years later, haunted by what he had witnessed, he wrote a series of letters describing the horrors of the Trail of Tears. Section 5. A Legacy of Injustice, the Trail's Enduring Impact. The Trail of Tears stands as a stark reminder of the injustices inflicted upon Native Americans throughout American history. It shattered the sovereignty of the 5 civilized tribes, decimated their populations, and left an indelible scar on their collective memory. The forced removal had a profound and lasting impact on the social, cultural, and economic development of these nations. The trauma of the Trail of Tears continues to resonate in Native American communities today. The loss of land, language, and traditional ways of life has had a devastating impact on generations of Native Americans. The forced assimilation policies of the 19th and 20th centuries further eroded tribal identity and created a legacy of poverty, health disparities, and social injustice. The forced removal of Native Americans exposed the hypocrisy at the heart of American democracy, revealing the limitations of its promise of equality and justice. Section 6. Echoes of the Past. Remembering the Trail of Tears. Despite attempts to erase or downplay this dark chapter, the memory of the Trail of Tears has endured. In recent decades, there has been a growing movement to acknowledge and commemorate this tragic event. Memorials and museums have been erected along the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail, which stretches for thousands of miles across 9 states. These sites serve as sacred spaces for remembrance and reflection. The stories of the Trail of Tears are being told and retold through books, films, documentaries, and works of art. These narratives, often told from the perspective of Native Americans, provide a powerful counter-narrative to the dominant historical accounts. They challenge us to confront the uncomfortable truths of the past and to recognize the resilience and humanity of those who endured the Trail of Tears. By remembering the Trail of Tears, we honor the memory of those who suffered and perished. Section 7. Unfinished Reconciliation. Confronting a Painful History. The Trail of Tears stands as a stark reminder of the unfinished work of reconciliation in America. It is a call to action, urging us to confront the legacy of injustice, and to work towards a more just and equitable future for all Americans. Reconciliation requires more than just apologies or symbolic gestures. It demands a fundamental shift in attitudes and policies. Education is essential to reconciliation. By teaching the full and accurate history of the Trail of Tears, we can help to dismantle the myths and stereotypes that perpetuate prejudice and discrimination. We must ensure that future generations understand the complexities of the past and are equipped to build a more inclusive and equitable society. Reconciliation also requires addressing the ongoing challenges faced by Native American communities. By confronting this difficult history, we can begin to heal the wounds of the past and create a more just and compassionate future for all.